Hey everyone, welcome to my very first solo video. So please bear with me. I don't have any intros. I don't have any fancy background. Actually, I'm staying at an Airbnb right now. So there's the blurred background. You're not going to see a whole lot there, I hope. So a lot of you have heard my story, at least some of my story. And I realized the other day when I was recording a podcast that there was a big part of my story that has not been told very well. It's missing. And I very much appreciate going on podcasts because never in my wildest dreams did I think over 300,000 people, or at least views, have seen my story, which I very much appreciate. But when I go on podcasts, I'm very limited and usually funneled in a direction wherever the podcaster wants to go. You know, they ask certain questions, we skip over some stuff and don't usually get to everything. And I've started to feel like I'm just kind of telling the same story over and over again, which is fine because each podcaster has a different audience. But there was this crucial part of my story that I thought was missing, and I haven't been able to articulate it very well. I haven't told it very well. I just haven't gone into the details. So please bear with me. We'll see how this goes. I do have some notes here. If you see me looking up here on the screen or maybe down in front of me, I did make some notes because this is a very difficult, it's a difficult topic. This is something that happened to me over many, many months, even a couple of years. So it's not just a story like, oh, one night I saw a spaceship and this is what happened. It's very long and involved and somewhat complicated. So please bear with me. I'm just going to be here talking to the camera. I know a lot of people do it, but I don't. So it's not my comfort zone. So this part of my story is about the spiritual side of my interactions with the phenomenon. It's going to be about religion. So if that's not your topic, maybe go to the next video. So it's going to be about how the so-called aliens tried very hard to influence my religion and my religious beliefs, which I find very interesting. So if these beings were just ETs from outer space, I ask myself, why would they care about my religion? Why would they care that I'm a Christian? So it's a weird story, but I'm not the only one. There are tons of abductees out there who talk about this battle between good and evil, the battle for the human soul. And it's very rarely articulated. I think as abductees, many of us, not all of us, but many of us inherently know that there's something very strange going on. It's something above and beyond ETs from outer space, stealing our DNA and creating hybrid children just for their own good. Just to save the race or what have you. So I hope this doesn't get too boring for you guys, but the backstory here is I was born in 1968. I am an old person. I know I've been told in my videos I don't look that old, and I appreciate you guys very, very much for saying that. But trust me, in person, I look my age. My age is 56 years old, and I very much look it. It's the camera. It's like I'm recording in 720 or something like that with my old computer. So, and there's these amazing touch-up features that they have on, and I just found it on StreamYard. I thought it was only on Zoom, but they also have it on StreamYard. So here I am. No, I don't. I'm not as young as I might look here. So I've said many times in spaces on podcasts, I feel like I was born a Christian. So I was baptized as an infant. I was born, I'm not covering the whole story today, you guys. I was a foster kid, all that kind of stuff. But once I was in my family and I did end up with my birth mother, the long story short, I was baptized. I went to Montessori school. I learned about God. I was singing songs. I was creating projects about God. I was exposed to the church at a very early age. My grandparents on my mother's side were very religious. They were Reformed and they were Calvinists. So that was one side of my family. The other side, my adopted father's side, they were also religious, but they were Lutheran. They were more loose in their thoughts and beliefs, but religion on both sides, Christianity on both sides. I remember being on my knees at the Jane Arms Apartments in Norwich, Connecticut. I was maybe in first or second grade, asking Jesus to be my savior, save my soul. I was learning the Shorter Catechism. You get the picture. So I feel like I was born into my religion. So I grew up as a Christian. There was never a time in my life when I didn't believe in God with my entire being. There's never been a moment where I didn't believe in God. There was no doubt that Christ was who he said he was, that he was sacrificed on the cross, that he paid for my sins, and that I was going to heaven when I died. That's it. That was solid. There was no doubt in my mind of any of that stuff. Now, keep in mind, while listening to this story, my first encounter with the phenomenon was at 3.5 years old. So to the Christians out there who say you would not be in this position as far as being an abductee if you had enough faith in Jesus, or if you were a better Christian, there's always something that I must be doing wrong if I am involved with this abduction phenomenon. And that's very disturbing because this started when I was 3.5 years old. So clearly at the age of 3.5, I didn't have a lack of faith or a lack of Jesus, etc. I had really done nothing at that point, except for I had already been baptized, I think, by then. So I was baptized as an infant, and I was born into a Christian family on one side and adopted on the other side by a Christian family. So that was my surrounding. So I was a covenant child, for lack of a better word. So it's very disturbing for me when Christians say, oh, you must be doing something wrong, to be part of this abduction phenomenon, when the research actually shows that it's generational. It runs in families, and it's Christians, it's non-Christians, it's every walk of life, every culture, every socioeconomic status, every race. There's a lot of people involved in this who have nothing to do with a lack of faith in Jesus. So don't get me wrong, I did some stupid stuff along the way. So as a kid, I was already seeing entities. I was lucid dreaming. I was going out of body. None of this was by my own doing. Either I was born that way, or perhaps I was being influenced by the phenomenon. I don't know. I just don't know. But I will tell you it was nothing I did as a child. So as I grew a bit older, I did some really stupid stuff. I played with the Ouija board when I was a teenager. I read some New Age books as a teen. I made some interesting life choices in my 20s. I'm not, particularly, well, I shouldn't say I'm not fond of it, because I am who I am because of the history of my life. But whatever I was doing during that time, I never fell away from being a Christian. I was always a Christian, and that's really the basis of my story here. And then by the time I was in my late 20s to early 30s, I got married, and I kind of got back into the church, more going to church and reading a lot of books and that kind of thing. And any liberal type thinking was completely gone. So you wouldn't have caught me playing with a Ouija board or, reading a book by Sylvia Brown or, anything like that by the time I was in my late 20s to early 30s. Now, because I had always been going out of body and lucid dreaming my whole life, I did read some books on those topics because it was something that was happening to me. And those could definitely fall into that New Age category. I think I was maybe in my early 30s when I was reading those books. But the short story is, which I'm not doing a very good job of making this short, I spent the next 20 years on a very straight and narrow path of being in Reformed theology. I was a Calvinist. I went to Reformed churches. I listened to R.C. Sproul on the his radio show every single morning. Actually had it on, a different platform. But over those years, I was on a very straight and very narrow path. I was a person in my family, besides my grandmother, because my grandmother wasn't that approachable. I was really the only one who could approach her. So I was the kind of second in command of my family. I was the one people came to when they had questions about their faith or questions about religion or questions about Christianity. I was never the best, but I was fairly schooled in apologetics and some of the philosophy and some of the major arguments against Christianity, against religion. I had studied several of the world religions. So this was a very, very big part of my life. So hopefully that gives a little background, probably too much background. So in 2021, and this is going to be right after COVID, so a lot of people kind of have this story. COVID hits, everybody starts questioning their reality, and some very strange things happened during this time to a lot of people. I was not the only one. So by 2021, I had some really big life changes that came about. I found myself moving out of state. And if you had told me at that time I was going to be moving out of the state I had lived in for decades, I would have laughed. I moved away from my family. My grandparents, my not as religious grandparents had died many years back, but my extremely religious grandparents died right around this time. And they were very strict in their thinking, and my thinking modeled their thinking. So if I had a question, they were the ones I would call when it came to religion or, Christianity, that type of thing. So I look back now and see them as some kind of restraining force, spiritually, a restraining force and influence on my life. And then once they were gone, all hell ends up breaking loose. It was just kind of weird. So in 2021, I move out of state. I end up moving, interestingly enough, to what is called a highly anomalous magnetic zone. So I didn't find that out until later, until I started having a mass ton of experiences with the phenomenon, and I started doing some research. So up until this time, hopefully very briefly, again, I started seeing the aliens when I was 3.5 years old, and I spent most of my adult life with shadow people. I had a lot of encounters. I had seen Hat Man at 17, and then I had a lot of encounters over the years with shadow people. And I did not understand until I was able to maintain consciousness during an experience with a shadow person, shadow thing, that had paralyzed me and put me in some type of I call it a straitjacket hold. I was able to break out of that and open my eyes. And lo and behold, there was a gray alien standing in my bedroom. I won't get into that whole story. But it wasn't until I was in my 50s, I'm 56 now, that I realized that the shadow people were involved with the aliens. And there are now abductees I've spoken to, for instance, Ted Rice, who have seen them use technology, the gray aliens, to turn themselves into a shadow or into a being that can easily travel the astral realm. And so I did not know this. My entire life, I knew I went out of body. I knew I spent some time in the astral realm, in the etheric realm, lucid dreaming, lots of very strange experiences, but I would have classified them as paranormal. And a lot of abductees classify their experiences as paranormal until they see a gray alien face to face. Some of us go many, many years without having any of that conscious recall. So that's where I was at. So I move, and they used to call me the mother to the world. I spent most of my law enforcement career, and then we owned a small business. I was day trading, but all during that time, I was a person in my family everyone came to. If someone needed advice, I used to say, let me consult the oracle. And it was just a joke. But I was a person everyone came to for advice. I think I was pretty solid. I come from a more logical, analytical background. I don't think the phenomenon is waiting for me around the corner at every, at every stop, so to speak. So I move. And at that time, I was no longer the mother to the world because I had moved and I was in a new state. It was just me and my husband. We didn't have any friends or family. I was retired at this time. My husband was retired and there wasn't a whole lot going on. And for some reason, I think I was on Facebook, but in the fall of 2021, and I have it written down here, it was actually August 28th of 2021 for reasons I cannot remember. I became intrigued by a remote viewing class that Lori Williams was putting on. And Lori Williams was Lynn Buchanan's protege. Now, Lori Williams was a Christian. She was a Christian missionary, and this was her background before she got into remote viewing. And so that was intriguing for me as a Christian. Now, I will never deny that there was a little voice in the back of my head. It was actually a large voice, maybe a medium-sized to large voice in the back of my head. And it said, don't do this. This is not good. This is not okay. This goes against everything you've ever been taught about. Don't engage in things like tarot cards and divination and remote viewing and psychic things and all that kind of stuff. It was totally against my religion. But here was a woman who was a Christian who was telling me that remote viewing is just accessing the subconscious mind. And all you're really doing when you're remote viewing is accessing the subconscious mind, bringing that right brain and that left brain together to access information that is already there. Now, I'm not going to use that as an excuse because I knew and I had that voice and I ignored that voice. And that voice nagged me, by the way. It wasn't just a one-off. It nagged me the whole time. So I enroll in her remote viewing course. And this was just, the very first one was just a free, 3-day course where she teaches them the basics of remote viewing. And you get to the end of that and you do a little project. And wow, lo and behold, I did great on it. And weirdly enough, my husband did really good on it too. My husband did better than I did. So I get involved in that class and I end up taking a course from Lori Williams. It's a paid course. It was extensive. It was her beginning course. It was something like 6 weeks or something like that. And then I enrolled in a group where I was involved in her monthly meetings and targets, et cetera, et cetera. So by this time, I'm pretty neck deep in remote viewing, and it is a super cool thing, and I'm decent at it. And I'm learning. It was controlled remote viewing, so I was learning all the the rules and going through all the protocols and stuff like that. There's a little final exam you have to take at the end of this class, and I was surprised by how well I did on it. And so it was very interesting. So during this time, I'm now in her Facebook group and I'm being exposed to a lot more ideas besides just remote viewing. I'm now being exposed to a lot of what, as a Christian, I would call new age ideas or new age thinking, which I had never entertained before, maybe briefly as a teenager, but once I was in my right mind as an adult, I had not entertained it. So I start, I got the ego, the ego trap tag in right around this point because I was someone who had experienced the paranormal my whole life. I had precognitive dreams and I could, sometimes tell when something was going to happen or call something ahead of time. And that was just me. That was just my life. And I didn't realize that was something that people said, oh, if you're good, if you have precognitive dreams and you have this somewhat psychic side of you, you could be really good at remote viewing. And so there was an ego trap there. I was like, oh, that's me. I'm that person. I've been seeing entities my whole life and all this kind of stuff. So somehow in there, and this is a very interesting aspect of the new age, if you have any psychic abilities, or if you have precognitive dreams, or if you're good at remote viewing, this somehow elevates you spiritually. So you somehow become more spiritual if you're good at these things. And it turns out that's not true at all. What is spiritual about having a precognitive dream? It's not spiritual. So anyway, I kind of fell into that ego trap. I did. I was a lifelong experiencer of the paranormal. I was very well versed in out of body experiences. I had precognitive dreams. I had joked about being the oracle. So I fell into this. I shouldn't say I fell into this. I went into this of my own accord, of my own choosing. I decided, you know what? I'm going to ignore this voice in my head. I'm going to ignore the nagging in my head. And I was always searching for justification. Like, Lori's a Christian. She's saying all I'm doing is accessing my subliminal, my subconscious mind. There's nothing nefarious about this. I'm not contacting entities. I'm not, making a deal with the devil, none of those things. This is just my own brain. And this was a gift given to me by God, actually. And I'm just going to use it. Now, interestingly, during this time, maybe she had a course on that. I can't remember exactly. But I start realizing in the Bible that there are areas of the Bible where the priests are casting lots to make decisions. And there's some interesting things going on that I just had never really thought of. And so I'm using that as well to justify the remote viewing. Now, what happens from the remote viewing is Lori, I believe it was Lori, who during one of her courses, she encourages everyone to hook up that right and left brain and get that information flowing. And one of her tips was to write down your dreams. So my dreams. So I start writing down my dreams. I'm like, okay, I can do this. This is easy. I went and bought a journal and I started writing down my dreams. Now, by the first or second week, I think I've said day, but it's actually, I think I've said, generally speaking, by the first day I was writing down my dreams, but it was actually the second week of writing down my dreams because I looked it up. I'm flying around in spaceships and I had met a hybrid child, a little girl sitting on my lap who was mine, but not mine, is how I have it written down in my journal. And I am thinking, oh my, I hope I don't die and somebody doesn't find my journal because this is getting a little weird. Like, they're going to think I'm off my rocker or I've lost my mind, these things that I'm writing down in my journal. So during this time, I am definitely being exposed to, at this time, it's dream material. That was very difficult to wrap my mind around. So this is stuff, again, meeting a hybrid child. I didn't even know what hybrid child was at this point, you guys. I just knew I was meeting a child who looked not quite human, and she was mine, but she was not mine. And I wasn't taking her home with me. I am going through gynecological procedures. I'm having, hormones tested, strangely. I start realizing that there is a reproductive component to what's going on in whatever this dream state is. And I still believe they're dreams at this time. And I reject this as being more than a dream because there's just certain things. I've talked about this on podcasts before. There's no reason to get into it. But there was no reason at that time for me to believe that I was actually pregnant and actually being used for these gynecological procedures, for these creating hybrid procedures. So I rejected this. I rejected what I thought was happening to me for a very long time based on science. It didn't occur to me, the aliens have better science than we have, and maybe they're able to do this once I'm past the age of being able to get pregnant. I think I just said it fairly easily or concisely there. So as I'm writing down my dreams, I'm actually starting to become more and more lucid in my dreams and in my awareness. But again, I'm rejecting this possibility that I'm actually flying around in spaceships and being used as some kind of breeding stock for these so-called aliens. So that's on the back burner. for now. So by this time, next thing I knew, I had gone from signing up for this lucid dream class. So I'm in the ego. Oh, I'm, psychic, and I need to figure out why. So I hadn't been going out of body a lot. There was a period in my life I was out of body all the time. I was exploring the etheric realm. I was, tiptoeing around trying to make sure I didn't get sucked back into my body, all kinds of stuff. So I end up signing up for a class at the Monroe Institute. And I think I took a lucid dreaming class or something close to that. I think it was a lucid dreaming class that I took at the Monroe Institute. I did all the, stuff. I did the recordings and the meditations and everything like that. Now, during this time, and if you guys could understand how quickly I went from being a Reformed Calvinist who would never, ever think of even dipping a toe into New Age thinking to this step. And it's only been, I don't even know by this time, it's only been a couple months at this time. My mind is blown. I look back on this period of my life and I think, who was this person? I don't even know who I was. This was not me. And it was me. I was making these decisions. I don't want you to think I'm blaming anything or anyone else but myself. But it was such a profound change that I just don't even know how I got here. But it was baby steps. It was me being introduced to a remote viewer who was a Christian telling me that this is just accessing your subconscious mind. But keep in mind, I had that voice in the back of my head. It wasn't that far back going, wait a minute, this just doesn't seem right. Okay. So I go to the Monroe. I didn't go to the Monroe Institute. I signed up for a class. I took 1 or 2 classes from the Monroe Institute. One of them, I don't remember if this was a class or if I just somehow got exposed to the Gateway tapes. And I started doing some of the Gateway tapes. Now, during all of these activities, I was very, very careful of not inviting entities into my life, or there's some aspects of these tapes and these classes and these New Age practices where you're actually trying to talk to entities and this kind of stuff. I was not doing that. I was still in my right mind as far as that went. So that I end up going from there to, and this is evolving over several months simultaneously with the abductions that are going on. This is happening. I end up doing the Monroe Institute stuff. I end up getting involved in DNA activations and energy work and just about every single contact modality you could possibly think of. I've done it. So I went from, again, being a super strict Reformed Protestant Christian to just diving into New Age contact modalities. I don't even want to talk about it, but here I am. Okay, so I was manifesting. I could manifest just about whatever I wanted, including I manifested a penthouse on the water. And that's an interesting story because it was one of these things where it wasn't for sale and then et cetera, and lo and behold, I made it mine. So, synchronicities were everywhere by this time. And this is going to be definitely by 2022. I am conflating Christianity and the New Age religion. So by this time, I'm coming across Dolores Cannon and people like Elizabeth April. And I am now at the point where I think, okay, this is all actually still just Christianity. It's just a fresher view. And maybe I was just kind of old fashioned in my thinking before. So I was consuming material about, ascending to 5D, this timeline shift that's supposed to be coming up. I'm like, oh, this kind of sounds familiar. As a matter of fact, Dolores Cannon has some channelings or at least some hypnosis sessions with someone who says that they were alive at the time of Christ. And I'm consuming all of this material. And I'm thinking, okay, well, this is just, the upgraded version. This is just a new way of thinking about my religion. And if you only had an idea of how incredibly uncharacteristic this was of me, you would, if you could just get into my mind, you would understand. I'm not gonna do a great job of trying to articulate that. I've said before on podcasts, my faith was so strong in my religion that I might as well have been a disciple alive at the time of Christ. That's how strong my faith was going into this period of my life. And by the way, I was over 50 years old. I was not young. This is not something I did, at the age of 15 or something like that. That's a whole other story. Okay, so some of these New Age processes, I suppose, were actually therapeutic. So at some point, me and my husband found Joe Dispenza. And Joe Dispenza has this phenomenal series. I actually took a class, and it's a whole series on, I'm going to butcher it, but just taking a deep breath and stop becoming reactive, try to understand what this process is within yourself. Why are you reactive? Why are you getting emotional? And just trying to just be a better person. And it was a great class. My husband also ended up taking this class, and he thought it was a great class. But from there, it was more downhill. I'm involved in energy work. I'm doing energy healings. I was able to conjure up chi balls. I mean, I was doing just about every single thing. I'm not hitting it all here. I was doing every single thing there was possible. I was the manifestation queen. I could get anything I wanted at this time. And also at this time, I become like a modern day Eve in the Garden of Eden. And this is the part about my story that I am absolutely ashamed of. And I still have a lot of guilt about it, because I went from the matriarch of the family. If someone had a question on religion or, moral standards or values or anything like that, they would come to me. So I am the modern day Eve in the Garden of Eden. I am spreading the New Age like a virus. I am telling kids about it, my siblings about it. I'm encouraging them to do it as well. I'm justifying it. It's literally like me spreading a virus. I spread it to my husband, to my entire family. I'm literally the modern day version of Eve, giving everyone else a bite of the apple. My family, they looked up to me. They counted on me. They counted on me to be grounded and of sound mind and thinking. So that's a lot of responsibility. And here I am telling them, oh, just raise your vibration and you can manifest anything you want. And I look back on this period of my life. Again, it's so out of character for me. And it came so fast and so hard and so out of character. And I still just can't believe it. And I can't believe I became the person who not only put my own self in jeopardy, but I was encouraging my family members, people who counted on me, to get involved in the New Age. It's a religion, in the New Age religion. So in the meanwhile, activity with the phenomenon is ramping up. I'm getting attacked by shadow people. I've become now more and more lucid during my abduction encounters and my encounters with the so-called aliens. So during this time, and this is most of 2022, I'm rejecting what appears is happening to me, which is being involved in some kind of strange reproductive stuff with the aliens. But at this time, I think they're ETs from outer space. I think that they are from another planet. And I had heard some of the arguments by this time that they're just upgrading their DNA. They just need us they did something wrong and they just need us to upgrade their DNA, or that they're somehow involved in, this ascension plan. I was hearing about the Galactic Federation, et cetera, et cetera. So this was during the time where I heard Ray Boucher for the very first time. And Ray Boucher is a paranormal investigator. He has decades and decades under his belt. He was on a podcast called Cultish. And I heard Ray Boucher talking about the demonic, let's just say, connection between the aliens and demons. And I actually had a visceral reaction to this. I turned it off. And it was funny because my husband kind of wanted to listen still, but we pulled up somewhere and I was able to just turn it off. And I turned it off because I had this weird visceral physical reaction to this topic. And I thought he was ridiculous. I thought this guy has no idea what he's talking about. These aliens have nothing to do with demonic entities. They are not demons. They are ETs from outer space. So I completely rejected that. So a lot of people like to say, because when you get to the end of my story, I actually come all the way back around. A lot of people like to say, well, she's a Christian. Of course, she thinks all aliens are demons. And that's just simply not true. I absolutely did not think aliens were demons. And in fact, I still don't think aliens are actually demons. So I thought they were ETs. And I completely disregarded Ray Boucher. I did not listen. I didn't want to listen to him. I turned him off. So by this time, I'm doing every meditation, manifesting, energy work. In September of 2022, me and my husband are in a small little town that's nearby where we live. And we're walking down the street. And I have a psychic pull into a crystal shop, which I don't think, maybe we had visited one crystal shop by then. Probably by this time, that's what was happening. I go into the shop. There's this giant, like life-size statue of a crystal, and it's like vibrating and sending off this energy. So we go into the shop, and by this time, I've already poisoned apple to my husband. He's already, all in on all of this stuff. And we go into the shop, and a woman who looks, very much like a gypsy approaches us. And she's focused on my husband, I think, during this first meeting. But she tells us that, I'll try to make this a short story. It's not going to happen. So she just beelines over to us, and she starts telling me and my husband. Well, first she tells my husband that he had a previous life in Egypt and that they had a previous life together. And she starts talking about that. But then she starts telling us that me and my husband had previous lives together, and that we're star seeds. We were there to spread, love and light to the world, and to spread the Great Awakening to the world. And the Great Awakening that she was pushing was involved with things like the Galactic Federation. And she ended up later sending me a bunch of different Instagram accounts. And it's all is it Jason Shakura? I should have looked his name up. These people who say that they're in touch with the Galactic Federation, and they're from, different planets, and they were born here, into human bodies to help assist with the Great Awakening. So she tries to convince us that we're part of the Great Awakening. Now, the first time we met this woman, I was spent almost 20 years in law enforcement. My husband spent a full 30 years in law enforcement. I do not suffer gypsies. So the first thing I thought when she started telling us about ourselves, and by the way, this was coming from her spirit guides. I should have mentioned that part. Her spirit guides wanted to talk to us. I am looking for every single thing possible. So how could this woman know who I am or know of my story? How could she have done a soft read on us? How could she be scamming us? And immediately, like, this woman, she's just a scammer. She's obviously does this for a living, and she's got nothing better to do, and she's trying to suck us into something. So that was our first meeting. We ended up meeting with her several times. She ended up becoming somewhat of an influence in both of our lives. And the short story is we were star seeds, and we had to spread the Galactic Federation message. Her spirit guides were very interesting because there was a time when me and my husband were both standing there while she was channeling her spirit guides, and both of us got really, really hot. And it's very difficult to explain, but I found out later that when you get really hot and really drained by someone's spirit guides, they're actually just feeding off your energy, which is super creepy. So I go through this period where I am getting influenced by my 3D world, my 3D life, with people and spirit guides, not my own, telling me that I'm a starseed and I need to spread the word about the Galactic Federation. So that's happening. In November of 2022, I end up having a very interesting experience where I think people have heard the story before, so I'm just going to say it very very quickly. I know I'm not doing a very good job. How long have we been going here? 39 minutes. That's great. I've gotten nowhere. Okay. So I'm in the shower, I am praying, but by this time I am praying to my higher self. And I should have known better, y'all. Should have known not to pray to my higher self, but there I was. I was praying to my higher self and God, by the way. But I added in my higher self. And I end up having this experience where I watch an entire sheath of snakeskin just slough off my body and go down the drain of the shower. And at the same time, a very beautiful, elegant blonde woman. She had an updo. I think she might have even had a little tiara on her head, which should have been a clue. High cheekbones, beautiful, downloads herself into my body. And I feel her settle into my body. And I'm just going, what in the world is this? And I convinced myself at this time, although I have it written in my journal, did I download an alien? Like, what is this? I try to convince myself at this time, this is my higher self. This had to have been my higher self. I downloaded into my body, and I can feel this entity in my body. I cannot even tell you guys what this is so weird. I can feel this entity in my body for the next 3 days. Now, as it turns out, the short story, which I'm not doing a very good job, this entity can actually access my body and has looked out of my eyes more times than just during this 3 days. But during the first 3 days, I could feel her settled into my body. She's looking out of my eyes. She is making her thoughts known to me. So she's in there. So over the next few months, and by the way, I am later told that this is the lady. And interestingly enough, my biological father had encounters with the lady. Whether is this the same lady as all the ladies, I don't know. I'm just telling you, my perspective on it. My father had encounters with the lady, with this, De Nino, which is essentially, I won't even get into that. Okay. So she downloads herself into my body. And over the next several months, and hopefully I'm getting into the meat of the story here, I end up caught up in a battle of spiritual warfare. And I know these words get thrown around a lot, but there's just no other way to say it. It's spiritual warfare. I end up getting bombarded in 3D life. I'm getting a lot of synchronicities and things that should not be happening. I'm going down the path of starting with New Age, but then it ends up going down the Gnosticism. I am exposed to prison planet stuff, Luciferianism, all kinds of different worldviews, I suppose I could call it. Every single thing you could possibly think of that would lead me away from being a Christian is what's happening. And during this time, I think by this time I had seen ancient aliens, all kinds of different stuff I was being exposed to. And during this time, I end up questioning my belief system. I end up going from, okay, I can do New Age because that's just kind of a fresh look at Christianity. But man, the Gnosticism, the Luciferianism, the prison planet stuff, the idea that the Archons are actually running this whole system and they have us trapped like an ant farm, all of that stuff, that was mind blowing for me. I had a really difficult time with it. And I had a difficult time I had to question, let me start over. I had to question my own belief system. So during this time, I realized, I started asking myself, am I a Christian because it's real and it's true? Which I believed it was, because I had done a lot of study. I had read a lot of books. I was 100% convinced. But by this time, am I a Christian because it's actually true, or because I was born into this belief system? And I asked myself that. And I tried really hard to just take a step back and ask myself, because a lot of these ideas were things I had never been exposed to. And I was over 50 years old, you guys. I had never been exposed to these ideas. So I just had to say, am I a Christian because it's real and true, or because I was born into this? Have I been brainwashed into it? Is this actually true? But this was the only thing I had ever been taught. So I thought it was prudent to say, wait a minute, I have to stop. I need to figure out why I'm a Christian. So I end up disconnecting from Christianity as a belief system. And I entertained all of the alternatives. I entertained everything there was. I don't think there's anything out there I was not exposed to, or that I did not have a look at. The possibility that Yahweh, this is a really popular idea. Yahweh is just a negative NHI, and he, is just some kind of petulant child taking his temper tantrums out, on humans. Everything, like I said, from Luciferianism, Rosicrucianism, Yahweh as a negative NHI, every single belief system out there, I entertained. I was exposed to it and I entertained it. So during this time, don't forget, I have this entity I have downloaded, and I sometimes wonder if this entity was working somewhat in the background on this 3D side of the material I'm being exposed to through things like synchronicities and that kind of thing that you guys already all know about. So I have the ancient aliens. I've got the entity inside of my body, I believe, directing some of this stuff. I've got an outside person who's trying to convince me, and her spirit guides, trying to convince me I'm a starseed and that I need to lead everyone to the Galactic Federation. And also during this time, I'm getting a large amount of downloads. And I didn't understand that word at the time. I never would have called it that, but that's what everyone in the community calls it. So that's what I'm going to call it. I'm getting downloads from the second I lay my head down, before I'm even asleep. I'm getting downloads of information from the phenomenon, from some black project. I don't even know. I mean, who knows where it's from? So in the meanwhile, I'm still getting abducted by the aliens, you guys. It's insane. So at this time, my life is just, it's full of the phenomenon from the minute I wake up in the morning to the minute I go to sleep, and even throughout my sleep at night. So I am now paying a lot more attention to what's happening during the abductions. I'm becoming more and more lucid, up to and including full 100% consciousness during some of these encounters. Now, this is where it comes to the part where being involved in some of the New Age practices are actually a double-edged sword, because I do think, on one hand, it's like drawing moss to a flame. The second we turn on anything that's psychic, it's like drawing moss to a flame, and you can attract all kinds of different entities. But it also has the double-edged sword effect of being able to raise your awareness and your lucidity. And I think that's what happened to me. So I end up becoming very lucid during my abduction events and realizing, I'm actually awake right now, and there's nothing you can do to convince me that I'm actually asleep and just involved in a dream, because it's as awake as I am just right now talking to you, awake. So that's happening. I think it was somewhere between November and December, somewhere around this time, and this is late 2022, I realized that these entities are transferring my soul. And that was too much for me. Like, I was going, wait a minute, what are ETs from outer space doing transferring my soul out of my body? And then keep in mind, this is a very telepathic environment. And yes, they are way higher up the food chain on this stuff than we are as humans. So I am picking up on the thought environment. Now, I keep in mind, they could be manipulating me on the thought environment. I always look for the manipulation there as far as, what they want me to know or what they want me to think. But I am picking up now that they are, it's just known. So while my soul is being transferred and there's different things that are happening, I'm being put into, this is too much. This is going to get too long. Go to one of the other podcasts if you want to know what was happening to my soul. So now at this point, it's just known. And people who have been on the ships, abductees will understand what I'm saying when I say it's just known that they are trying to reverse engineer not only my soul, but the human soul at large and in general. They're trying to reverse engineer the human soul. And if they're not able to reverse engineer the human soul, they are going to hijack it and or try to trap the human soul. And so this is hitting me and I'm going, whoa, like y'all are not ETs from outer space if you're trying to trap the human soul. At this point, I'm changing my thinking and I'm realizing that if I really just step back and look at this logically and use just a couple of my investigative skills to try to understand what's going on, I realize, okay, these are not ETs from outer space. And by the way, when I say, and I said in a podcast, I don't think they're from outer space. I don't think they're from other planets. What I'm trying to say is that's not the core of their being. So could there be ETs from another planet? Maybe, I don't know. These ETs, so-called ETs, involved in the abduction phenomenon, involved in the hybrid children, and involved in what appears to be a takeover of our souls and our planet, I don't think they're from outer space. That's a whole other topic that we don't need to get into. But it's not that I don't believe that there's a possibility of ETs, from some other planet. They could have traveled to other planets with their equipment, for all I know. But whatever these things are, they're much more than ETs from outer space because they are involved in apparently trapping the human soul. And they had proven this to me by doing it to me. So I also, during this time, I already said this once, I come to understand that the shadow people I had encountered my entire life were involved with the alien abduction phenomenon. Now, I'm not trying to tell you every single shadow person you ever see is an alien. I'm not saying that. I'm saying some shadow people are aliens or involved with the aliens. I'll leave it loose like that. So by late 2022 to early 23, I am a hot mess. I am now realizing the entities I'm dealing with are very deceptive. They are manipulative. I start pushing back during abductions. During this time, I am also involved in a spiritual crisis. I'm questioning my religion. I'm entertaining all of the religions. It's very difficult to explain to you that these aliens on board the ships, the aliens or the phenomenon giving the downloads, this entity is living or at least accessing my mind and body. And then the outside influence from the 3D is all hitting me at once. This is all happening simultaneously. A lot of times when I'm on podcasts, I just tell this general story like, hey, the aliens try to get me to change my religion, but it's very extensive. And I opened up my journal this morning to take some notes here. So I had the timeline correct. And I'm in tears because of the stuff that I'm reading in here. It's mind blowing, even to me. I'm so glad I was writing everything down. So I'm pushing back during the abductions. By this time, I'm actually getting just outright threatened. So the aliens have gone from, we're just your space brothers, trying to upgrade our DNA to, by the way, we're going to terminate you if you don't stop questioning our agenda. That happens twice. And that's a whole other story in and of itself that maybe I'll get into someday. I'm also confronted by, I'm just going to say, the entity came off as Satan himself. And this is going to be 2 times. I was confronted with an entity who came off as Satan himself. And those are whole other stories as well. And I'm already on 54 minutes. I have not even told the story yet. Okay, so I'm going to leave those on the back burner. I then understand at this point, and I've said before, it was embarrassing how long it took me to go from everything's love and light, I'm the new age, I'm going to 5D, I'm going to ascend as a starseed, and I'm going to take all of humanity with me, to the aliens are trying to trap my soul. Not only me, but there's an agenda for all of humanity. It took me so long, you guys, to take off the blinders and to see what was right in front of my face. It's embarrassing how long it took me. So I realize, and it is now just known, and I'm having encounters every night. It is just known that I am now in a battle for my very soul. And by the way, I gave this to them. I gave this to them by entertaining their ideas, the Luciferianism and the New Age stuff and the contact modalities. I gave myself over to them. This was not something that was stolen from me. This was something I handed to them. Now, yes, I have been an abductee most likely since I was at least 3.5 years old, but that's a whole different story than actually handing my soul over to them and listening to the lies and feeding into the lies and actually trying to get other people to believe in the lies. That's how bad it was for me. So, and again, this might not happen with every abductee. I'm just telling you my story. This is my story. This is what happened to me. So I now, it's just known. It is known. And if you've been in the environment, you know, it is now known that I'm in a battle for my soul. And at this time, I know that I have to make a decision. I have to decide whether I am going to return to the religion of my birth or go just dive into the religion they want me in. And this is very difficult to explain. I have journals of it written down, but to explain it, just to try to be concise, which I have yet to do, they wanted me on the Luciferian track. So they would have been happy with New Age, but they wanted me on that Luciferian track. They wanted me to believe that Satan was the good guy. They wanted me to believe that Satan is the good guy who's actually trying to bring humans technology and break us out of the matrix. Yahweh is the bad guy. He's trying to keep humans down. The story in the Garden of Eden was just reversed. And Lucifer is the one bringing us technology, bringing us knowledge, bringing the light to the world, and trying to get us out of the matrix. This is what they wanted me to believe. So I knew it was really weird, but I was up against a deadline and I was being pressured to go one way or the other. So I knew I had to make a decision. So I had to kind of step back and try to sift through all of the lies, the manipulation, and the deception, and just try to use some logic and try to step back and look at it from the outside, which is hard to do. I'm not going to say it's easy to do. So I have some notes here I'm reading. Oh my gosh. It's funny. So during this time, I'm not only getting downloads on, why I should be Luciferian, but I'm also getting, people have asked me so many times, do you ever get anything from the good side of the phenomenon? Well, as a Christian, I can say I have gotten stuff that appears to be the good side of the phenomenon, although I am still very, very skeptical at the entirety of the phenomenon. I have a note here on May 1st of 2023. I have a note, and I just got an audible message. I was awake, and I heard a voice. It was a male voice, and it said, "May the way be with you." And now I'm looking that up. I'm going, what is the way? Well, the way could lead just straight to Jesus, but it could also lead potentially, to the Essenes. And there's some controversy on the Essenes and what they were all into. So I don't take those messages, at face value. I don't know what type of manipulation is coming my way. So it's at this time that I start seeing these demonic type entities. At one point, they actually try to get me to recycle my own soul. And I told this story on the confessionals, my very first podcast with the confessionals. I tell that story. I'm now seeing they have the energy of demonic beings, but they have animal heads. So they start off looking as human, but they actually have animal heads. And I now understand these are depictions of the old gods, the old Egyptian gods. So I have seen the Birdman god and this thing that looks like a dog, maybe half dog, half pig man. I've seen trolls. I've seen this really weird bear looking creature. And these things are trying to get me, they try to get me to recycle my soul, which, by the way, was in a spaceship. And so people sometimes don't understand why I lump all of this together, because I have seen the shadow people with the grays and these old gods, these weird demonic animal head looking entities in a giant mothership spaceship, where they try to get me to recycle my own soul, which is a whole other topic. What are spaceships doing involved in soul recycling? You know, we could go down that road. I think I've done some videos on that before. So they're all working together, you guys. You might not see them all acting behind the scenes. So again, it was just known that I was kicked up the food chain. I went from seeing aliens, and by the way, I see it a lot of, they're hybrids. They're telepathic humans, but they're hybrids. And I go from seeing those things to seeing straight, demonic entities, and the old gods have now been busted out to deal with me. And it's just known that I've been kicked up the food chain. And it's because I am locked in this battle of which way am I going? What am I going to choose? Not only am I pushing back during my abductions, I'm not falling for, maybe as quickly as they would have liked, falling for the Luciferianism, the message that they wanted me to swallow hook, line, and sinker. So on February 16th of 2023, I have written in my journal, and this is, you could call it a download, you could call it an epiphany, you can call it whatever you want, but I am making a decision at this point. And I have written down, Christ is the truth, Satan is lies, and the prince of the power of the air. He's the God of this age and the father of lies. And everything in this world is based on lies mixed with some truth to make everything resonate and believable. And Christ is the one who gave us a way out. So I have that written down in my journal. One day later, after I make my decision that the Luciferian route, which is the route the aliens wanted me to take, the aliens, the old gods, whatever. I don't care what you want to call it. They're all involved. Yes, there might be warring factions. There might be factions trying to gain power one over the other. I'm not denying any of that. All I'm telling you is that I've seen them all working together toward common goals. And on a spaceship too, by the way, which is super creepy. So one day later, after I make a decision that at that point, Christianity was the closest thing to the truth that I had within my reach, because I am barely treading water here. I wake up to full lucidity on a medical table, on a spaceship, in an underground base, somewhere in a medical facility. And I am filleted open from my belly button down. I've said before I was cut open, but it's not a cut. It's not a surgical cut. It is a trauma. I was filleted open like an animal had gotten to me. I've told this story, I think, on Orbis Paranormal just a couple of weeks ago, so I don't have to go too far into that. But the so-called doctor who was at the end of the table during this story ends up telling me that his name is Baphomet. Super weird. And he is later involved in a ritual in an arena where I'm at. So things are getting really weird. This incident, again, happens one day after I had put it in writing that I'm choosing Christianity. So, okay, could someone say it's not related? Sure, you could say it's not related, but you haven't been in this ongoing battle for months, maybe longer than that, with nightly lessons and downloads and contact by the phenomenon, and it just being known that I was in a battle for my soul and that I had to make a decision. So please keep that context in mind. I was actually shocked because I knew, and I have told this story just generally speaking. I've told this story before in a very general way, but when I went back and looked at the dates of when this happened in my journal, I was shocked. I thought, you are kidding me. This was one day after I woke up after a battle for my very soul and making the decision to choose Christianity. I woke up on the table, filleted, I was cut open from my belly button down all the way through my pelvis, all the way through my back side. All of it was open. This is not an accident. This was not a surgical intervention, for my own health. By the way, they sent me a picture later of how that happened. And it was, again, just known how it happened, and it was by severe trauma. So by a creature, by the way, who called himself Baphomet. So whatever is happening, whatever these things are, they want me to believe that a creature by the name of Baphomet is responsible for me being in this state. And again, one day after I chose Christianity. And at this time, my faith is really weak, you guys. It's so weak. I'm barely hanging on by a thread. By March 3rd, I'm confronted again with termination. And this is because, and it is just known, that it is because I am now, not only am I pushing back against the abductions, I had by this time caused, I had been in a physical fight with a hybrid who was trying to get me with a needle. So I'm pushing back during abductions by the aliens, but I'm also pushing back on their narrative and their agenda. I'm realizing these are not space brothers. They are not our friends. And they are very interested in the human soul. And by the way, I had to figure all of this out myself, you guys. I did not come across the abduction research until I joined UFO Twitter sometime March or April, right after this very severe incident in March 3rd. I didn't find the abduction research. I didn't know this was happening to other people. I had a very generalized view of the aliens, as our ET space brothers. So I know they're trying to trap the human soul and that they are not who they're pretending to be. And here it comes. So on March 3rd, I'm not going to get into the story. I don't think I've ever even told it. I am told this is how it was always going to end. And they make it very well known that they're going to kill me. I know this sounds insane. But again, either they are going to kill me or they want me to believe with every fiber of my being that they're going to kill me. Either way, that's how it came across. So I'm not going to get into that incident right now. This is the final incident that caused me to sleep in a helmet made of Velostat for 7 months. So after this incident, I actually tried to stay awake. It was 3 or 4 days. I ordered the Velostat on like an emergency overnight status. My husband has this material out on our kitchen table, cutting it and making this helmet for me because by this time I am terrified. What happened on March 3rd and really what happened waking up on that medical table that I told you guys about, those two incidents made me terrified of these creatures. These two incidents made me understand that if I pushed back on them at all, whether it was their alien abduction agenda, their old gods, these demonic entities, the religion they wanted me to choose, when I pushed back on that, there was going to be hell to pay for that. And it wasn't just a threat. In the other two times, they had threatened me by using other people. This time, they made good on their threats, and they used me and my body to do it. So I slept in this helmet made of Velostat for 7 months. That was the outcome of me making this decision. Now, that's not the end of the story. This continues and goes on for all of 2023, and it's now 2024, and now it's 2025. Today's 2025. So this keeps going on, but I'm going to stop there because this is the story of this battle I was in. And I've been very short on it before, but today's not that day. I'm already over an hour. So I am 100% convinced that I was in a battle for my soul, that I had to choose between Luciferianism and Christianity. I do entertain the possibility of a reverse psychology type of thing. I've entertained that, but that doesn't make a lot of sense to me because they could have just left me where I was at. They could have just left me as a Christian. And even in the New Age, where I just thought I was helping, the entities, survive by them taking my DNA and breeding hybrids. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. They wouldn't have had to exert any influence on me at all. They could have just left me where I was. But instead, they exerted heavy influence. And it was from within my own body. It was, from the outside. It was during downloads. It was while I was on the ships during abductions. It was coming in from all sides. So why wouldn't they just leave me there? I don't buy that. For that, not just for that reason, but for other reasons as well that it's just too many to get into on this, what was supposed to be a short video. So I'm going to wrap it up. Hopefully some people stayed with me because I think I've rambled a bit here. I think I ramble a lot anyway. So in closing, it's very difficult to properly articulate what I went through during this period. So what was happening was these creatures wanted me to believe just about anything. Anything would have sufficed. I think, if I had calmly just settled into the New Age, maybe they wouldn't have tried to get me to Luciferianism. I don't know. Or maybe that was just a step toward Luciferianism, which it very well could be, baby steps. But whatever it was, they wanted me to believe anything other than plain old-fashioned Christianity. The plain old-fashioned Christianity belief system. They wanted me to believe anything other than that. And I'll give you a little list here, I have it written down, of the different things they wanted me to believe. And I see them exerting this influence on other, not only abductees, experiencers, but the entire human race. How many people are being affected by channelers? Just someone like Bashar. How many people are listening to Bashar? And I don't even know what his exact message is. I'm just throwing him out there as a channeler who a lot of people listen to. The Law of One, Bashar, Elizabeth April, Dolores Cannon, all of these very famous New Age people are affecting humans at large, Christians at large, other religions at large. It's not just abductees and experiencers who are being influenced in this way. But if you listen to a lot of abductees and experiencers, it's very interesting that many have the same message. And I'll tell you the messages they wanted me to believe. They wanted me to believe in Christ consciousness, not the actual Jesus Christ, the historical figure who walked the earth, who was God come in the flesh. They want me to believe in Christ consciousness. Christ as an ascended master, Christ as an alien hybrid. Christ was just an alien hybrid, maybe an Arcturian or Illyrian starseed who came, to teach us about love. You can be a god. They wanted me to believe I could be a god, just like Christ. They really pushed this ascension to 5D. They were pushing the starseed, that I was just here to bring light to humanity and insist in the Great Awakening and to usher in the Galactic Federation, which, by the way, if we just grow up a little bit and, raise our consciousness and our vibration, the Galactic Federation is going to come save us. They wanted me to believe Yahweh was a negative NHI or just a baby god, among baby gods. Again, that Lucifer is actually the good guy trying to bring us knowledge and free us from the matrix. Rosicrucianism, and basically it was anything and everything except for Christ come in the flesh, the Son of the living God. They would have been satisfied with anything. Maybe they overplayed their hand, by going to the Luciferianism. Maybe that was a mistake. I don't know. I might never know. But I will say, from my point of view, this is my opinion, their entire goal is to get each and every person, because every single one of us is important, every person, each person away from the true God and Christ. And they'll do it in any way they can. Notice how no alien or no channeler wants anyone to actually believe in biblical Christianity. It's a little bit suspicious, if you ask me. And again, if they're just ETs from outer space and they're just here to study us, or even if they're just using our genetics to upgrade their DNA, and they have nothing whatsoever to do with souls and the ultimate destiny of the human soul and the afterlife realm, which you all know by now, there's a lot of overlap there, suspicious overlap, then why in the world would they have cared about my religion? It just makes no sense whatsoever. So thanks, you guys, for sticking with me. I know some of these parts were probably pretty boring for you, but I just wanted to get it all down. I'll probably put this out. This will probably be my first video that I put out on my YouTube channel, which I have no videos on except for the podcasts I've done. So if you stuck with me this far, I appreciate you, and thanks for watching. And that will be all for now. Until next time, maybe I'll do this again. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if this is just a disaster or not. So thanks, you guys.